What happens when a police captain's wife walks into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom and tries to use her husband's badge as leverage? You're about to see one of the most stunning examples of entitlement ever caught on camera, followed by a level of betrayal that is genuinely shocking. This case isn't only about a drunk driver facing consequences. It's about a woman who has relied on her husband's authority for years, finally realizing that some problems can't be solved with a quick call to someone in power. Tell us where you're watching from, because what Judge Caprio says to this woman and what her own husband later does deserves to be seen everywhere. It's a cold Monday morning in Providence Municipal Court. At 9:30 a.m., Judge Frank Caprio is reviewing one of the most serious matters on his docket. Christine Morrison, age 42, is charged with driving under the influence causing serious bodily harm, leaving the scene of an accident, and reckless endangerment. These charges come from an incident 4 weeks earlier that left an elderly couple in the hospital and the community demanding accountability. On the night of October 15th, Christine Morrison left a downtown wine bar after spending 3 hours drinking with friends. Surveillance footage shows her struggling to walk to her Mercedes SUV, dropping her keys twice before getting inside. She drove off at 8:45 p.m. with a blood alcohol level later measured at 0.15, almost twice the legal limit. At 9:02 p.m., while driving through a residential area, Christine failed to stop at the intersection of Hope Street and Angel Street. She crashed into a 1998 Honda Civic driven by 73-year-old Robert Chen, with his 71-year-old wife, Margaret, in the passenger seat. The collision was severe. The Chen's car spun 180 degrees and slammed into a telephone pole. Robert sustained 3 broken ribs and a fractured collarbone. Margaret's injuries were even more serious: fractured hip, broken wrist, and a serious concussion that left her unconscious for almost an hour. And Christine, she paused for about 15 seconds, according to witnesses. Long enough to see the injuries, long enough to hear Margaret Chen crying out in pain, long enough to decide what to do. She chose to drive away. Police later found her Mercedes parked in her garage 40 minutes after the incident. With the front bumper crushed and a headlight broken, Christine was inside her home, pretending to be asleep. Her husband, Police Captain David Morrison, wasn't there. He was on the night shift at the station. When officers arrested her, Christine's first words weren't, "Is anyone hurt?" or "I'm sorry." Instead, she said, "Do you know who my husband is?" Now, 4 weeks later, she stands in Judge Caprio's courtroom, carrying that same attitude with her. Christine Morrison enters, wearing high-end clothing that reflects wealth and status: a Chanel jacket, costly jewelry, the type of outfit that suggests she's used to being the most important person wherever she goes. Her attorney, Marcus Webb, from one of Providence's top and most expensive law firms, walks beside her holding a leather briefcase that probably costs more than many people's monthly car payment. But what everyone notices isn't the clothing or the attorney. It's her demeanor. Christine doesn't enter the courtroom with the uneasiness most defendants show. She walks in as if she's attending a formal luncheon where she's the guest of honor. Head raised, expression relaxed, almost uninterested. She sits at the defendant's table and immediately looks at her phone, not anxiously, but casually, as if she has more important matters waiting. Judge Caprio watches her closely, the same way he observes every defendant. In his 32 years on the bench, he has learned that body language often reveals far more than anything a person says. And Christine Morrison's body language sends a clear message. She sees this as a waste of her time. The bailiff announces the case. Judge Caprio reads the charges aloud, his tone reflecting their seriousness. Driving under the influence and causing bodily injury is not a simple traffic matter. It's a criminal offense that can lead to years behind bars. Christine's attorney rises immediately and delivers a polished, well-prepared statement. He emphasizes her remorse, her previously clean record, and her positive role in the community. He mentions that she is a committed wife and mother, insists this behavior is completely out of character, and argues that she has already suffered enough from the stress and embarrassment surrounding the case. It's a strong, carefully structured defense, the kind that might be effective with a different judge, a different defendant, or on a different day. But Judge Caprio has reviewed everything: the police report, the hospital documentation, and the witness accounts. And while her attorney speaks at length about remorse, he notices that Christine Morrison shows none. She's back on her phone. Judge Caprio stops the attorney mid-sentence and addresses Christine directly, asking whether she understands the seriousness of her actions. Christine looks up, mildly irritated at being spoken to. Her answer is surprisingly casual. She says yes, she understands. She calls it an unfortunate situation and states that she's sorry it happened. She adds that she's willing to pay whatever restitution is needed to resolve things. She describes it as an unfortunate incident, as though it were a minor parking lot scrape, not an accident in which she almost killed 2 elderly individuals and left them injured on the road. Judge Caprio then asks whether Christine remembers leaving the scene. Her attorney quickly steps in, offering an explanation. She was in shock, overwhelmed by the accident, and not thinking clearly. He claims she drove home on autopilot, not fully processing what had occurred. Judge Caprio turns to Christine again, asking her directly. He wants to hear from her, not her attorney. Does she recall choosing to leave the scene? Christine pauses. For the first time, she seems slightly uneasy. She admits that she does remember. She panicked and made a poor choice in a moment of fear. Judge Caprio notes that the police report states she was clear-headed enough to park her car inside her garage, go indoors, change her clothes, and pretend to be asleep when officers arrived. That behavior doesn't match someone too overwhelmed to think rationally. Christine's lawyer objects, arguing that these details can be clarified and that trauma impacts individuals differently. He insists his client's mental state was impaired, but Judge Caprio is no longer interested in further explanations. He asks a straightforward question. Has Christine Morrison attempted to contact the Chen family to apologize or check on their condition? The silence answers before her attorney can respond. The answer is no. In the 4 weeks since the incident, Christine hasn't reached out once. No apology, no concern for their well-being. She has been focused on working with her high-priced attorney, building her defense, and protecting herself. Judge Caprio then reviews the victim impact statement from the Chen family. Robert Chen spent 2 weeks hospitalized. Because of his collarbone injury, he can no longer lift his grandchildren. Margaret Chen underwent surgery for her fractured hip and faces long-term rehabilitation. At 71, she may never fully regain her mobility. She is now afraid to travel in cars and suffers from recurring nightmares about the collision. Their medical expenses exceed $180,000. Their vehicle was destroyed. Their sense of security has been deeply damaged, and the woman responsible has not made a single effort to offer an apology. Judge Caprio looks at Christine again. Why? He asks. Has she not contacted the victims? Christine's response reveals everything. She says her attorney advised her to avoid any contact. It's a legal strategy, she explains. Any communication could be used against her. A legal strategy, not compassion, not a sense of responsibility. Legal strategy. Judge Caprio's expression tightens. He tells Christine that while her legal approach may help her in court, it also reflects her character, or the absence of it. And this is when Christine makes her critical mistake. She rises suddenly, catching her attorney off guard. Her voice shifts, revealing a tone she had kept hidden. She claims Judge Caprio doesn't understand the situation, that he's drawing conclusions without the full context. Judge Caprio asks what information he's missing. Christine inhales and delivers the statement that will define this entire hearing. Your Honor, maybe you don't know who I am. I'm Christine Morrison. My husband is Captain David Morrison of the Providence Police Department. He holds one of the highest positions in the city. When you start giving out severe penalties, when you start treating me like any ordinary offender, you're going to cause issues. Issues for you, for this court, problems that could be avoided if we approach this reasonably. The courtroom falls completely silent. Did she just use her husband's police title to pressure a judge? If you're not subscribed, hit that button now, because what follows is one of the most remarkable courtroom moments you'll see. Judge Caprio's expression remains unchanged. His tone stays steady, almost overly calm. He asks Christine to clarify her statement. Christine, mistaking his calmness for uncertainty, continues. She explains that her husband has strong connections throughout the legal community, that he knows prosecutors, judges, and police leadership, and that it would be better for everyone if this situation were handled with proper perspective. She's not even trying to hide it now. She's openly implying that the judge should consider her husband's position. Her lawyer keeps tugging at her sleeve, urging her to sit down and stay quiet. But Christine is done listening. She has relied on her husband's badge for years. She's used it to avoid speeding tickets, move ahead in lines, and secure reservations at crowded restaurants. To her, it's a shield that makes problems disappear. Judge Caprio asks a straightforward question. Is Captain Morrison in the courtroom today? Christine's confidence dips. She admits he isn't present. He's at work. She says busy man, important duties. Then Judge Caprio's next statement changes the atmosphere in the room. He asks the bailiff to look around the gallery and check if anyone connected to the case is present. The bailiff scans the courtroom. Suddenly, his expression shifts. He nods toward a man in the back row dressed in civilian clothes. Judge Caprio asks the man to identify himself. The man rises slowly. He appears to be in his late 40s, fit, composed, carrying himself with the discipline of someone with a long service record. His voice is steady but weighted with emotion as he speaks. Your Honor, I'm Captain David Morrison, Providence Police Department. I'm Christine Morrison's husband. Christine's face loses its color. Her husband has been there the entire time. He heard everything, every remark, every claim, every attempt to use his rank. Judge Caprio asks Captain Morrison to approach the bench. The captain walks down the center aisle, the entire courtroom watching. As he passes his wife, he doesn't look at her. Christine reaches out to touch his arm, but he pulls away without speaking. He stops before Judge Caprio. Standing with the posture of someone who has spent years in uniform, there's pain in his eyes, shame, but also a firm sense of responsibility. Judge Caprio addresses him formally. He notes that this is an unusual moment, but since Christine used his name and authority, he feels it's only fair to allow the captain to speak. What Captain Morrison says next will be remembered in this courtroom for a long time. He tells Judge Caprio he had no idea his wife planned to mention him, and that he clearly told her not to involve his position. He explains that he is not here to defend her, but to show respect for the justice system she attempted to influence. He's been married to Christine for 17 years, and in that time, he's watched her change into someone he barely recognizes, someone who believes rules don't apply to her because she married a man in uniform, someone who has used his status more than once, even though he repeatedly objected when he learned about the accident. The elderly couple she struck and left behind, he was horrified. He immediately notified his superiors and removed himself from anything connected to the case. He refused to cover up anything, regardless of what his wife expected. He tells Judge Caprio there's something important he wants the court to understand. He does not support his wife's actions or her attempts to intimidate anyone. He believes she should face the full outcome of her decisions. With no regard for his rank or role, then he says something that makes Christine physically recoil. He tells Judge Caprio that if the court is questioning whether the maximum penalty is appropriate, he is here to say, go ahead. His wife nearly took the lives of 2 innocent people and left them behind. She deserves every consequence the law allows. Christine tries to interrupt, but Captain Morrison raises his hand. He isn't done. He tells Judge Caprio about the Chins. He visited them in the hospital not as an officer, but as a person ashamed of what his wife had done. He offered them his apology. He looked directly at Robert Chen, a 73-year-old Vietnam veteran awarded the Bronze Star, a retired postal worker who had spent his life serving the public, and he apologized for being married to someone capable of causing this harm. Margaret Chen had told him something that has stayed with him ever since. She explained that they were driving home from their grandson's birthday celebration. They had just watched their 7-year-old grandson blow out his candles. They were talking about how fortunate they felt to see him growing up. And then his wife's Mercedes appeared suddenly and took that sense of blessing away. Margaret may never walk without a cane again. Robert can no longer lift his grandchildren. Their later years, which should have been calm and comfortable, are now marked by ongoing pain, fear, and emotional distress. And his wife described it as an unfortunate incident and even threatened the judge to avoid any consequences. Captain Morrison's voice shakes slightly as he explains to Judge Caprio that he is filing for divorce. After 17 years of marriage, after everything they have experienced together, he cannot remain married to someone who did what she did and shows no sincere remorse. Someone willing to threaten a judge, someone prepared to use his career, his reputation, and his integrity as leverage to escape responsibility. The courtroom is completely silent. Christine is crying, but they are not tears of accountability. They are tears of fear. The protection she relied on is gone. The person she used as a shield has publicly withdrawn his support. She is about to face real consequences for the first time in her adult life. Judge Caprio thanks Captain Morrison for his testimony. He tells him that his honesty and courage reflect exactly what law enforcement should stand for, and that Providence is fortunate to have an officer with such strong ethical standards. Captain Morrison nods, unable to speak. He walks back up the aisle. As he passes his wife, she reaches out for him again. Desperate for connection he no longer offers. He pauses, looks at her for a long moment, and finally says quietly, "I don't recognize you anymore." Then he walks out of the courtroom. Christine remains alone at the defendant's table, her high priest attorney suddenly appearing far less assured. Judge Caprio shifts his focus back to Christine, his voice firm and unyielding. He explains that, in his 30 years on the bench, he has seen many types of arrogance, but using a police officer's rank to intimidate a judge while that officer's spouse sits in the gallery may be the most blatant act he has ever encountered. Christine begins to apologize, insisting she didn't intend it the way it sounded, but Judge Caprio stops her immediately. He tells her that her husband was correct. She nearly took the lives of 2 elderly individuals. She left them hurt, bleeding, and terrified on the roadside. She avoided responsibility, and when she was finally required to appear in court, she tried to manipulate justice by citing her husband's position. The sentence he delivers is severe: for driving under the influence causing injury, a maximum fine of $5,000, and a 1-year license suspension for leaving the scene of an accident involving injuries. An additional $2,500 fine and mandatory jail time 60 days, served on weekends over the next 6 months, for attempting to sway the court through threats and improper use of law enforcement. Status: 300 hours of community service at Rhode Island Hospital's Trauma Center, specifically assisting accident victims and their families. But Judge Caprio doesn't stop there. He orders Christine to complete 1 year of mandatory alcohol counseling and undergo random alcohol testing. Most importantly, he requires her to write personal apology letters to Robert and Margaret Chen, to be delivered under court supervision. and to make herself available for an in-person meeting if they decide they want one. The total outcome includes $7,500 in fines, 60 days in jail, 300 hours of community service, a 1-year license suspension, and the very public embarrassment of having her attempt to interfere with the process recorded in the official court record. Christine's attorney moves to object, calling the punishment too harsh. Judge Caprio's reply quiets the entire courtroom. He states that Christine Morrison had every possible advantage: financial security, education, and a husband who served the community with integrity. She could have contributed positively to Providence. Instead, she chose actions that put people at risk, neglected victims, and undermined the justice system. The sentence remains. Christine is escorted out to begin processing. She's now crying uncontrollably, not out of remorse for what she did to the Chens, but because she's finally dealing with consequences that her husband's position can't shield her from. Within hours, the video spreads online. Police captain's wife threatens judge. Husband supports. Maximum sentence becomes national news. Captain Morrison is praised for maintaining his principles. Christine becomes an example of how privilege and misconduct can collide. 3 months into her sentence, something unexpected occurs. While completing community service at Rhode Island Hospital, Christine comes across a familiar face. Margaret Chen is there for a physical therapy appointment, walking slowly and painfully with a cane. When she notices Christine, she pauses. Christine stops as well. She's feared this moment. She wrote the required apology letters, but the Chens never replied. She doesn't know whether they read them or whether forgiveness is possible. Margaret studies her for a long moment. Then she speaks, her tone calm but steady. She tells Christine that she received the letters, that she knows Christine is serving her sentence, and that she's aware Christine has been attending AA meetings and working in the trauma unit as part of her rehabilitation. Margaret says something that shatters Christine. She admits she's unsure if she can ever truly forgive her. The pain is still raw, and the fear hasn't faded. Yet, she sees Christine genuinely trying to change, and that is more than she had hoped for. Margaret talks about their grandson, the 7-year-old whose birthday party they had just left. He constantly asks about them. He's afraid something might happen to them and even has nightmares. Margaret wants Christine to understand the full impact of drunk driving, not just on the victims, but on everyone who loves them, whose lives are permanently altered. Christine struggles to speak through her tears. She tells Margaret she thinks about them every day, that she's deeply sorry, and that she knows words aren't enough, but she is working to become someone who would never repeat this mistake. Margaret nods, then says something that changes the moment. She tells Christine that her husband is a hero, that what Captain Morrison did standing up in court, prioritizing justice over loyalty to his wife, required courage most people never show. She hopes Christine realizes what an extraordinary man she lost. Christine does, every single day. 6 months later, Christine finishes her sentence. She's sober, humble, and continues volunteering at the trauma center, even beyond her required hours. She has become someone patients genuinely trust, someone who can speak about consequences from personal experience. Captain Morrison's divorce is finalized. He's moved on, dating a fellow officer who shares his values. He never speaks publicly about Christine, but those close to him know he made the right choice. The Chens are slowly recovering. Robert's ribs have healed. Margaret still uses a cane, but her doctors are optimistic. They're both in therapy, working through the aftermath of their trauma. Their grandson sees them regularly now, and his nightmares are gradually fading. Christine, meanwhile, has sold her luxury wardrobe and moved into a modest apartment. She works a standard job in hospital administration and takes the bus, as she doesn't have a license and doesn't trust herself to drive. She's no longer the person who stormed into Judge Caprio's courtroom, threatening him with her husband's badge. Now, she's someone learning, often painfully, what it means to be accountable. 1 year after the sentencing, a local news station does a follow-up story and interviews Judge Caprio. He offers a statement that perfectly captures the essence of the case. Some people have to lose everything before they discover who they truly are. Christine Morrison lost her husband, her freedom, her privilege, but perhaps, in the process, she gained something more valuable: accountability. And that, he suggests, is worth far more than any badge or social status. Don't forget to subscribe for more courtroom stories where privilege meets justice. And judges like Frank Caprio show that no one, no matter the name they invoke, is above the law. Hit the like button if you believe that threatening a judge by exploiting a spouse's position is one of the lowest forms of corruption. Share your thoughts in the comments on Captain Morrison's decision to support the maximum sentence for his own wife. This story isn't just about one entitled woman facing justice. It's about the courage it takes to do what's right rather than what's comfortable. It's about a police captain who valued the law over protecting someone who didn't deserve special treatment. It's a reminder that every badge, rank, and position of authority carries responsibilities, something some people only realize after losing it all. Christine Morrison entered the courtroom thinking her husband's rank was protection. What she discovered was that it was his integrity that truly mattered. By the time she learned that lesson, it was too late to save her marriage, but perhaps not too late to save herself. That is justice. That is accountability. That is the legacy of Judge Frank Caprio.